The shuttle descended through the golden clouds of Prime, and Ambassador Laura Mitchell pressed her face close to the window like a child seeing snow for the first time. Below her stretched a city that made every human achievement look small. Towers of crystal and living metal rose toward the sky in impossible shapes. Rivers of light flowed between buildings, carrying vehicles that moved without sound. This was the capital of the Concord of 13, the alliance that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. And today, humanity would ask to join them. Laura straightened her uniform and checked her reflection in the dark screen of her tablet. She was 52 years old, with gray streaks in her brown hair and lines around her eyes from decades of difficult negotiations. Earth had chosen her for this mission because she never lost her temper, never raised her voice, and never gave up. She would need all of those skills today. Captain Daniel Perry sat across from her, his military uniform crisp and perfect. He was younger than Laura by 15 years, with a soldier's straight posture and watchful eyes. He commanded the USS Horizon, the ship that had carried them across 300 light years to reach this place. "Nervous?" he asked. Laura smiled, terrified but excited too. This is the most important day in human history. The shuttle landed on a platform of white stone that floated in the air without any visible support. A delegation of aliens waited for them, tall and thin creatures with blue-green skin and 4 arms. These were known throughout the galaxy as diplomats and record keepers. "Welcome to Prime," said the lead in perfect English. "I am Coordinator. I will guide you to the Grand Assembly." Laura thanked him and followed with her team of 6 diplomats and advisors. They walked through corridors of impossible beauty, past fountains that sprayed water in patterns that gravity, past gardens where flowers sang soft melodies, past windows that showed views of distant worlds. Everything whispered the same message. You are small, you are new, you are nothing compared to what we have built. The Grand Assembly was a dome so large that clouds formed near its ceiling. Thousands of seats rose in circles around a central platform, and beings from across the galaxy filled those seats. Laura recognized some species from the files she had studied. The insect-like, the massive stone-bodied, the ethereal whisper kind who existed partly in dimensions humans could not perceive. And above them all, on a throne of living light, sat High Arbiter of the. They were beautiful in a cold way, with silver skin and eyes like black diamonds. They had guided the Conquered for 3,000 years and had held his position for 2 centuries. He looked down at the human delegation with an expression Laura could not read. "You may speak," he said. His voice carried through the dome without any visible amplification. Laura walked to the central platform, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. She had practiced this speech 100 times. She had memorized every word. But standing here, beneath the gaze of 1,000 alien species, she felt those words slip away. So she spoke from her heart instead. "We are humanity," she said. "We come from a small world orbiting a yellow star in what you call the outer territories. We discovered faster-than-light travel just 30 years ago. We know that we are young. We know that we are small, but we believe we have something to offer." She spoke of human art and music, of poetry and stories that explored every emotion. She spoke of human science, of the curiosity that drove them to ask questions and seek answers. She spoke of human determination, of the way they had survived ice ages and plagues and wars to reach the stars. She spoke of human compassion, of their desire to help others and build bridges between different peoples. "We ask only for a chance," she concluded. "A chance to learn from you and to share what we know, a chance to grow alongside you, a chance to prove ourselves." Silence followed her words. Then from somewhere in the upper seats, she heard a sound that needed no translation. Laughter. The representative rose from his seat, his mandibles clicking in amusement. "This creature speaks of offering something to us. What could primitives who discovered fire yesterday possibly offer to civilizations that were ancient when their sun was young?" More laughter rippled through the chamber. Laura felt her face grow hot, but she kept her expression calm. High Arbiter raised one silver hand and the laughter stopped. He looked at Laura with those black diamond eyes, and she saw no warmth there, no curiosity, nothing but cold assessment. Your species has been evaluated, he said. You are classified as developmental stage 3. You have not yet earned the right to address this assembly. Your petition for membership is. Your request for trade agreements is. Return to your territories and continue your development. In perhaps 1,000 years you may petition again. Laura stood frozen for a moment. She had prepared for rejection, but not like this. Not without discussion, not without questions, not without any recognition of humanity's worth. High Arbiter, she said, keeping her voice steady, I respectfully request the opportunity to address specific concerns. If there are areas where humanity falls short, we would welcome guidance on how to improve. His expression did not change. There is nothing to discuss. You are dismissed. The representative clicked his mandibles again. Perhaps the humans could serve some purpose. We always need test subjects for medical experiments, or simple laborers for mining operations. Laughter again, louder this time. Laura looked around the chamber at the faces of beings who saw her species as nothing more than animals, as jokes, as potential slaves. She memorized those faces. She would never forget them. Thank you for your time, she said, and her voice did not shake. Humanity will remember this day. She walked out of the grand assembly with her head held high. Her team followed in stunned silence. None of them spoke until they reached the shuttle, and then Daniel Perry finally broke the quiet. What now? He asked. Laura looked back at the beautiful, terrible city one last time. Now we go home, we build our own future, and we remember. The shuttle rose through the golden clouds, carrying humanity's representatives away from a galaxy that did not want them. Below, the Conquered continued its ancient business, its members already forgetting the primitive creatures who had dared to ask for acceptance. They would remember eventually. The galaxy would learn that humanity never forgot a slight, never abandoned hope, and never stopped growing. But that lesson would come later, written in fire and loss. For now, the shuttle climbed toward the stars, and Laura Mitchell began composing her report to Earth. They rejected us, she wrote. They laughed at us. They offered to make us slaves, but they made one mistake. They let us go home, and they have no idea what we will become. 50 years had passed since the day of humiliation on Prime, and Governor Samuel Hayes stood on the balcony of his office watching the sunset over New Portland. The sky burned orange and purple above fields of grain that stretched to the horizon. Children played in the streets below, their laughter rising up to him like music. This was a human world, built by human hands, and it owed nothing to anyone. Samuel was 68 years old, born on Earth but raised among the stars. He had spent his whole life watching humanity grow, and the pride he felt never faded. 12 colony worlds now circled human suns. 30 billion people lived beyond Earth, and every single one of them knew the story of Prime. His assistant, a young woman named Kelly Torres, entered the office with a tablet in her hands. Governor, the quarterly reports are ready. Would you like the summary? Samuel nodded and turned from the window. Give me the highlights. Kelly smiled. Agricultural output is up 12%. The new irrigation systems are working better than expected. Industrial production has increased by 8%. And the research division reports a breakthrough in energy storage that could double the range of our ships. What about the medical program? Doctor and his team have completed trials on the cellular regeneration treatment. Early results suggest we can extend healthy human by 40 years. Kelly paused, her smile growing wider. They would kill for this technology, literally. Samuel allowed himself a small laugh. The still died from diseases that human medicine had conquered a decade ago. The still relied on computer systems slower than what human children used for games. The great civilizations of the conquered were stagnant, resting on achievements made thousands of years ago, while humanity ran forward with the energy of a species that had something to prove. "Any contact from our friends in the conquered?" Samuel asked. "Three more trade requests this month. They want access to our entertainment archives. They are offering rare minerals for samples of our agricultural techniques, and a merchant tried to bribe a customs officer for medical supplies. And we told them all the same thing. Politely but firmly, human goods are not for sale to conquered species, as you ordered." Samuel nodded. This was official policy, approved by the Coalition Council and supported by 90% of the human population. The conquered had rejected humanity, so humanity rejected the conquered. Simple, clean, fair. But not everyone agreed with this approach. On the other side of New Portland, Admiral Grace reviewed fleet readiness reports in her office at the Colonial Defense Headquarters. Grace was 71 years old, but her mind remained sharp and her will remained iron. She had been a young officer on the USS Horizon, part of the delegation that traveled to Prime. She had watched Ambassador Mitchell walk out of the Grand Assembly with dignity despite the laughter. She had sworn that day that no one would ever laugh at humanity again. "Status of the Fourth Fleet?" she asked her aide. "Fully operational, Admiral. All ships have completed upgrades to the new shield systems. Combat drills show a 30% improvement in response times." Grace studied the holographic display that showed human territory. 12 stars, each with its own defensive grid, its own early warning systems, its own fleet of warships. The conquered had thousands of worlds, but their military had grown soft from centuries of peace. Grace had run simulations. In a straight fight, human forces could match any single conquered species. Not that she wanted a fight. She wanted to be left alone. She wanted humanity to grow strong in the shadows until no one could threaten them ever again. So far, her wish was coming true. Far away, on Prime, a scientist named worked alone in his laboratory late at night. The laboratory was not official. His research was not approved. But he could not stop himself from studying the strange species from the outer territories. Had intercepted human broadcasts for decades. He had learned their languages, studied their history, analyzed their technology. And what he found frightened him deeply. Humans advanced faster than any species in recorded history. They improved their technology not over centuries but over years. They adapted, they innovated, they refused to accept limitations. In 50 years, they had gone from primitive explorers to a genuine threat. In another 50 years, they might surpass the conquered entirely. He had tried to warn the council. He had submitted reports, requested meetings, begged for attention. But the senior officials had dismissed his concerns. Humans were primitives. Everyone knew that. They had said so, and they were never wrong. Looked at his latest data and felt cold fear in his hearts. The humans had just tested a new weapon, something that could punch through shields like paper. They were not preparing for trade or diplomacy. They were preparing for the day when the conquered finally noticed how strong they had become. But the conquered did not notice. The conquered was busy with its ancient politics, its endless ceremonies, its comfortable certainty that nothing would ever change. The great powers of the galaxy looked inward, fighting over privileges and positions that had been contested for. None of them looked outward, toward the darkness between galaxies where something old and hungry had finally awakened. On the colony world of Haven's Rest, a young technician named Amy Mitchell checked sensor readings at the Deep Space Monitoring Station. She was 23 years old, the granddaughter of the famous ambassador, and she had inherited her grandmother's sharp eyes and patient nature. "That's strange," she muttered, looking at an energy signature that pulsed at the edge of detection range. Her supervisor, an older man named Frank Carter, looked over her shoulder. "What do you have?" "Unknown energy source, bearing 279, distance approximately 40 light-years. It's not natural. The pattern is too regular." Frank frowned. "Probably a conquered ship passing through neutral space. Log it and move on." Amy logged the reading, but she did not move on. Something about that signal bothered her, something that felt wrong in a way she could not explain. She flagged it for review by the analysis division and returned to her regular duties. The flag sat in a queue for 3 weeks before anyone looked at it. By then, similar readings had appeared in 6 other locations. By then, the first conquered worlds had begun to die. But that was still in the future. For now, humanity continued to build, to grow, to prepare for a day of reckoning that they believed would come from the conquered. They had no idea that the real threat came from somewhere else entirely, from the empty spaces between stars where light itself was afraid to travel. Governor Samuel Hayes finished his evening meal and stood again at his balcony, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, the galaxy continued to ignore humanity, and humanity, for now, was happy to be ignored. "Let them laugh," Samuel said to himself. "We will have the last word." He could not know how soon that word would need to be spoken, or how terrible the price of speaking it would be. High Arbiter had ruled the conquered for 212 years, and in all that time he had never known fear. He knew it now. He stood before the great window of his palace and watched the sky burn with the death of another world. The colony of Prime was dying. Billions of machines swarmed across its surface, machines that came from nowhere and wanted everything. They ate metal and stone and flesh without preference. They with every meal. They could not be stopped, could not be reasoned with, could not be understood. The conquered had named them the Devouring, and the name was perfect. "How many lost?" asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His advisor, a young named, checked her tablet with trembling hands. 3 worlds confirmed destroyed. Prime, and the research station at. Estimated casualties exceed 40 billion. Closed his black diamond eyes. 40 billion lives, gone in less than a week, and the machines were still coming, still growing, still hungry. Our fleets. The 5th and 7th battle groups engaged the enemy at Prime. They were destroyed in 4 hours. Our weapons cannot penetrate the machine's armor. When we do damage them, they repair themselves within minutes. Every ship we lose becomes material for more machines. Had lived long enough to see empires rise and fall. He had witnessed plagues and wars and natural disasters that killed billions, but he had never seen anything like this. The Devouring was not an enemy. It was an ending. What do our scientists say? Hesitated. They believe the Devouring is an ancient weapon, possibly created by a species that existed before any current civilization. It was dormant for millions of years in the void between galaxies. Something woke it up. Now it seeks to consume all matter in its path and will not stop until nothing remains. Can it be stopped? Unknown High Arbiter, we have found no weakness. Turned from the window and walked slowly to his throne. He was old, older than any other alive, and he felt every year of that age pressing down on him. He had built his power on certainty, on the absolute conviction that the way was the only way, that the conquered was eternal and unchangeable. Now that certainty crumbled like sand. "We need help," he said. The words tasted like poison in his mouth. They did not ask for help. They gave orders and others obeyed. But pride meant nothing when your civilization was being eaten alive. From whom, High Arbiter? The conquered has no allies outside its membership. Every species we know is already under attack or preparing defenses. Not every species. Understood immediately, and her silver face paled. The humans, High Arbiter, we rejected them. We laughed at them. We offered to make them slaves. I remember what we did. I was there. His voice carried the weight of old shame, buried for 60 years and now dragged into the light. But the humans have grown strong while we grew comfortable. Their ships are fast, their weapons are new, and they owe us nothing. Perhaps they will refuse, but we must ask. He summoned ambassador of the finest diplomat remaining in conquered service. Was old for his species, with faded blue-green skin and tired eyes, but his mind remained sharp. "You understand the mission?" asked. "I do, High Arbiter. I must go to the humans and beg for their help. Offer them everything. Full membership, technology sharing, formal apologies, whatever they want. The survival of the conquered depends on your success." Bowed and left to prepare his ship. Watched him go, knowing that the fate of trillions now rested on whether humanity could forgive. The journey to human space took 3 days. Spent that time studying everything the conquered knew about humanity, which was far less than he expected. The humans had kept to themselves, revealing little to conquered observers. They had built a civilization in silence, growing strong in the shadows while the conquered looked elsewhere. When his ship entered human territory, expected to be challenged or attacked, instead, a human patrol vessel appeared alongside and escorted him peacefully to New Portland. The humans had known he was coming. They had prepared for this moment. President Cole received in a simple office with wooden furniture and windows that looked out over green fields. Was 64 years old, tall and lean with gray hair and eyes that revealed nothing. He had been elected 3 years ago on a platform of isolation and self-reliance. His people trusted him to protect their interests against a galaxy that had rejected them. "Ambassador," said, gesturing to a chair, "please sit. I understand you have come with a request." Sat and folded his 4 hands in his lap. He had rehearsed this speech many times, but now the words felt inadequate. "President Cole, I come representing the conquered of 13. We face an enemy that threatens to destroy everything we have built. We have watched our fleets burn and our worlds die. We have no answer to this threat. And so we come to you, to humanity, to ask for your help." Listened without expression. When finished, he remained silent for a long moment. "You ask for our help," finally said. 60 years ago, Ambassador Laura Mitchell stood before your Grand Assembly and asked for yours. She offered friendship and cooperation. She asked only for a chance to prove humanity's worth. Do you remember what you gave her?" Lowered his eyes. "I was not present at that assembly, but I know what happened. We rejected your people. We mocked them. We suggested they might serve as laborers or test subjects. It was wrong. I cannot defend it." "No, you cannot," stood and walked to the window. "My grandmother was one of the advisors in that delegation. She told me stories about that day when I was a child. She never forgot the laughter. None of us have. President Cole, I offer full membership in the conquered, access to all our technology, formal apologies from every member species. Whatever you ask, we will give." Turned back to face. Where was this generosity 60 years ago? Had no answer. He sat in silence, knowing that the fate of his civilization hung on the next words from this human's mouth. "I will bring your request to the Coalition Council," said. "They will debate and decide, but I make no promises, Ambassador. Humanity owes the conquered nothing. We built our strength alone without your help despite your contempt. If we choose to help you now, it will be our choice, not our obligation." Bowed his head. "I understand, and I thank you for hearing me." Called for an aide to escort to quarters where he could wait. When the was gone, stood alone in his office, looking at images on his tablet. Images of conquered worlds burning. Images of billions of refugees fleeing in ships too slow to escape. Images of children crying in the arms of parents who could not protect them. He knew what was right. He knew what was just. The problem was that those two things might not be the same. The council would debate. The people would argue. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the devouring continued its endless meal, growing stronger with every world it consumed. Time was running out for everyone. The Coalition Council chamber was built for calm discussion, with soft lighting and comfortable seats arranged in a circle. Today it felt like a battlefield. Voices rose and fell in anger and passion as humanity's elected representatives debated the most important question their species had ever faced. Admiral Grace stood at the center podium, her military uniform crisp despite her 83 years. She had served humanity for 6 decades, and now she presented the facts without emotion. Our intelligence confirms that the devouring has consumed 27 conquered worlds in the past month. Current estimates suggest approximately 200 billion casualties. The enemy continues to expand at an accelerating rate. At present speed, the machines will reach human territory in approximately 2 years. Counselor Maria Santos leaned forward in her seat. She was 45 years old, representing the colony of New Madrid, and she had built her career on humanitarian causes. Admiral, what would intervention require? If we chose to help the conquered, what would it cost us? Grace touched a control, and a holographic display appeared showing fleet positions and battle projections. Full military intervention would require deployment of 70% of our combat forces. Based on analysis of conquered engagements, we estimate 30 to 40% casualties in the first 6 months. We could slow the devouring's advance, possibly stop it, but the price would be measured in millions of human lives. The chamber fell silent. Millions of lives. The words hung in the air like smoke. Counselor Henry spoke next. He was 62, representing the industrial world of Sheffield Colony, and his voice carried the anger that many humans felt. So we are being asked to sacrifice our children for species that laughed at us, species that offered to make us slaves, species that ignored us for 60 years while we built everything we have with our own hands. The conquered rejected us, Maria countered. But the billions dying on those worlds did not make that decision. Children are dying, Counselor. Families are being torn apart. Can we really stand by and watch? They would have watched us die without a second thought, Henry shot back. They made their choice. Now they face the consequences. The debate continued for hours. Representatives from every human colony spoke their minds, some calling for intervention, others demanding isolation. The arguments grew heated, personal, ugly. Old wounds opened as humans remembered the humiliation of Prime, the decades of rejection, the contempt that the galaxy had shown their species. President Cole listened to every word. He sat in the observer's gallery, forbidden by law from directly participating in council debates, but his presence shaped the discussion. Everyone knew that whatever decision emerged would have to implement it. Finally, as the artificial night fell over New Portland, asked to address the council, the representatives fell silent as he walked to the podium. I have listened to you all, he said. I have heard the anger and I understand it. I carry that anger too. 60 years ago, the galaxy told us we were worthless. They laughed at our ambassador. They suggested we might make good slaves. That insult shaped everything we have become. He paused, looking around the chamber at the faces of people who trusted him to lead them through this crisis. But I have also received intelligence reports that I must share with you. The devouring will reach us in 2 years whether we help the conquered or not. We cannot hide from this enemy. We cannot build walls high enough to keep it out. The question is not whether we will fight, but when and how. Maria Santos nodded slowly. Then intervention is also self-defense. In part, yes, but I did not come here to argue for full military intervention. Touched the podium controls, and a new display appeared. I propose a middle path. Humanitarian aid and refugee acceptance, but no military engagement. We will send rescue ships to evacuate civilians from threatened worlds. We will open our borders to those fleeing the devouring. But we will not send our sons and daughters to die defending people who would not have done the same for us. The chamber erupted in new debate, but the tone had shifted. His proposal offered a way forward that satisfied neither extreme but that most could accept. After 3 more hours of discussion, the council voted. The measure passed by a narrow margin. Human rescue fleets launched within days. Ships designed for exploration and cargo transport were rapidly converted to carry refugees. Medical teams prepared for mass casualties. Colony worlds opened camps to receive survivors from the dying Concord. Lieutenant Amy Mitchell stood on the bridge of the rescue vessel Hope of Dawn, watching the stars blur as the ship jumped toward Concord space. She was 35 years old now, promoted rapidly through the ranks due to her skill and her famous name. Her grandmother, the legendary ambassador Laura Mitchell, had died 2 years ago, but Amy carried her memory like a shield. First stop is the colony of announced Captain Susan Park, a veteran officer with iron-gray hair and steady hands. Estimated refugee population of 3 million. We have capacity for 50,000 per trip, so we will need to make multiple runs. Amy nodded, calculating the logistics in her head. 60 trips minimum, assuming the colony survived that long, assuming the devouring did not arrive early, assuming everything went perfectly, which it never did. We will save as many as we can, Amy said. That is all we can do. The Hope of Dawn was one of 40 rescue ships, and together they began the largest evacuation in galactic history. Human crews worked around the clock, loading terrified refugees into ships that felt impossibly small for the task. They carried families who had lost everything, children who would never see them again, survivors who looked at their human rescuers with confusion and shame. On Prime, High Arbiter received reports of the human mission. He had hoped for warships. He had hoped for the military might that humanity had built in secret for decades. Instead, he received mercy without justice, kindness without commitment. They will save our people, said, reading the latest dispatch, but they will not fight our war. Stared at the images of human rescue ships loading refugees. He understood now the true price of ancient arrogance. Humanity had not turned against the conquered. They had simply stopped caring. They offered help because they were better than the species who had rejected them, not because they felt any loyalty or debt. Indifference hurt more than hatred ever could. On Earth, retired Ambassador Laura Mitchell had lived long enough to see the news of the rescue mission before her death. Her granddaughter Amy had called her from the Hope of Dawn, seeking wisdom for the days ahead. Grandmother, did we make the right choice? Should we be fighting instead of just rescuing? Laura had smiled, her face lined with age but her eyes still sharp. The right choice and the kind choice are not always the same, dear. Sometimes you must choose your own survival over perfect morality. The conquered is reaping what it planted. We are not obligated to save them from their harvest, but saving the innocent costs us nothing but effort. Do that much, and you can face yourself in the mirror. Amy remembered those words now as her ship approached another dying world. The sky ahead glowed with the light of burning cities. The devouring had arrived ahead of schedule. Millions who might have been saved would now die because the universe was not fair. All hands to evacuation stations, Captain Park announced. We have 6 hours before the machines reach the primary population center. Let us see how many we can carry to safety. Amy ran to her post, knowing that every minute counted. Behind her, somewhere in the darkness, the conquered continued to crumble, and humanity stood at the edge, helping where they could, preparing for the day when the devouring came for them. That day was coming faster than anyone expected. The conquered was dead, not dying, not struggling, but gone. The last official transmission from Prime had come 3 weeks ago, a desperate plea that cut off mid-sentence as the machines swarmed over the Golden City. 200 worlds had fallen, trillions had died, 10,000 years of civilization reduced to metal and dust. Lieutenant Amy Mitchell guided the Hope of Dawn through the debris field that had once been The ship's sensors detected no life signs, only the cold signatures of machine swarms feeding on the remains. They were too late for this world, but reports indicated survivors on a moon in the outer system. Contact, announced Ensign David from the sensor station. Approximately 3,000 life signs in an underground shelter, mostly civilians. Captain Susan Park nodded grimly. Take us in. Full speed. We have maybe 4 hours before the machines detect them. The rescue took 3 hours and 27 minutes. 3,000 terrified crowded into cargo bays designed for half that number. Children cried. Adults stared at nothing, their compound eyes reflecting horrors that no one should witness. Amy helped an elderly female to a seat and was surprised when the alien gripped her hand with unexpected strength. "Why?" they asked in broken English. "Why do you help us?" Amy did not have a good answer. She squeezed the alien's hand and moved on. The Hope of Dawn jumped to safety just as the first machine scouts appeared on sensors. Behind them, the moon began to die. Amy watched until the light faded to nothing, then returned to her duties. Back in human space, the mood had shifted from cautious observation to urgent preparation. The devouring had crossed into the buffer zone between conquered and human territory. Admiral Grace, now commanding from her flagship the Steadfast, gathered every available ship at the colony of Haven's Rest. "This is where we make our stand," she announced to her officers. "The machines will not go around us. They consume everything in their path, so we give them something to choke on." The human fleet was impressive, over 300 warships armed with weapons that the conquered had never seen. But everyone knew the truth. Numbers and technology had not saved the conquered. Something more would be needed. That something came from an unexpected source. Among the refugees were thousands of conquered scientists and engineers who had escaped the destruction of their worlds. Most were broken, traumatized beyond usefulness. But a few still had fire in their hearts, including a researcher named who had spent decades studying humanity. Requested a meeting with President Cole and Admiral. He arrived carrying a data tablet and trembling with exhaustion, but also with hope. "I know what the devouring is," he said without preamble. "I have studied it since the first attacks. It is a weapon created millions of years ago by a species that no longer exists. It was designed to eliminate rival civilizations, and it works by converting all matter into copies of itself." "We know this already," said impatiently. "But you do not know the key." Activated his tablet, projecting a complex diagram. "The machines are not independent. They are controlled by a central signal, a coordination frequency that tells them where to go and what to consume. Destroy the source of that signal, and the entire swarm shuts down." Leaned forward. "Where is this source?" "At the center of the swarm. A structure approximately the size of your moon, protected by billions of machine units. Your conquered tried to reach it 6 times. All attacks failed." "What makes you think we can succeed where you failed?" Looked at with eyes that had seen too much death. "Because we attacked with fleets and formations and military doctrine that had not changed in 3,000 years. You humans do not fight that way. You adapt. You improvise. You find solutions that no one else considers. I have studied your species for 60 years. If anyone can destroy the signal source, it is you." Exchanged glances with. The Admiral's expression had shifted from skepticism to calculation. "Show us everything you have," she said. The planning took 5 days. Human and conquered scientists worked together for the first time, sharing knowledge without reservation. Engineers modified weapons based on analysis of machine weaknesses. Pilots trained for maneuvers that no military academy had ever taught. The strike force assembled in secret. 20 ships crewed by volunteers who knew they probably would not return. Amy Mitchell stood among them, having requested transfer from the Hope of Dawn. "You do not have to do this," Captain Park had told her. "Yes, I do. My grandmother spent her life trying to build bridges between species. This is my chance to finish what she started." The force launched at midnight, jumping deep into the swarm where no living being had ventured before. The machines detected them immediately, converging from all directions. Human ships scattered in patterns designed to confuse and divide the pursuit. Amy piloted a bomber called Swift Justice, weaving through debris and enemy fire. Her target was the signal source, a massive structure that pulsed with cold light at the heart of the swarm. Beside her flew ships from 3 other human squadrons and 2 conquered vessels crewed by volunteers who had nothing left to lose. "Enemy concentration ahead," reported her co-pilot, a young man named Chris Taylor. "Density is off the charts. We will never punch through. Watch us." The human ships hit the machine formation at full speed, weapons blazing. Conquered vessels followed, drawing fire away from the bombers. Ships exploded on all sides, human and alien alike dying together for a chance at survival. Amy pushed swift justice through a gap in the enemy line, taking fire that stripped away shields and armor. Warning lights screamed. Hull breaches sealed automatically. The ship shuddered but kept flying. The signal source loomed ahead, impossibly large, impossibly old. Amy armed her payload and aimed for the weak point that it identified, a structural flaw where 2 construction phases had been imperfectly joined. "Launching," she said, and pressed the trigger. The weapon flew true, striking the ancient structure and detonating with a light brighter than any sun. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the signal source cracked, shattered, and went dark. Across the galaxy, billions of machines stopped moving. Ships that had been attacking went silent. Swarms that had been consuming worlds fell dead. The devouring was over. Amy guided her damaged ship away from the wreckage, barely functional, bleeding air and power. Rescue vessels found her 3 hours later, unconscious but alive. She woke in a hospital on Haven's Rest, surrounded by flowers and messages from people she had never met. President Cole visited her personally, standing at her bedside with an expression she could not read. "You saved everyone," he said. "Human conquered everyone." Amy shook her head weakly. "We saved everyone, humans and conquered together." Smiled for the first time in months. "Yes, together. Perhaps that is how it should have been from the beginning." The galaxy would spend decades rebuilding. The conquered was gone, but its peoples survived, scattered across human worlds and new colonies established in the ruins of the old order. Old hatreds faded as former enemies worked side by side to create something new. Amy stood at a memorial 6 months later, looking at names carved in stone. Human names and alien names, all those who had died in the final battle. Beside her stood a young soldier named, whose mother had been an advisor to High Arbiter. "My people were wrong," said quietly. "We should have welcomed you when you first came to us." Amy placed her hand on the memorial, feeling the cold stone beneath her fingers. "We were wrong too. We let old anger stop us from helping when help was needed most. A lot of people died because both sides held onto pride." "What happens now?" Amy looked at the sky, where human and conquered ships flew together on patrol. The galaxy had changed. The old powers were gone. The old divisions were healing. Something new was being born from the ashes of ancient mistakes. "Now we build something better," she said. "Not human, not conquered, but something new. Something that remembers the price of arrogance and the value of standing together." Nodded slowly. "I would like to help build that." "Then let us get started." They walked away from the memorial together, toward a future that neither of their peoples could have imagined alone. Behind them, the stone names caught the sunlight, a reminder of what had been lost and what had been saved. The galaxy had ignored humanity once. It would never make that mistake again.